Welcome to the MBD podcast, the show where we dig into what's actually working or not when it comes to scaling businesses with the people who've been there. Today's guest has been there plenty of times, so feel free, go ahead, introduce yourself, tell everyone where you've been, what you're doing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jason. Hey, everyone listening in. My name is Eric Thum, joining you from New York today. I started my career in finance and consulting, but have been in B2B SaaS marketing for the last decade or so. Spent a long period of time at Salesforce building product marketing and go-to-market strategy teams, worked on some of the biggest launches and products that they released, such as the Slack acquisition, kind of most notably, and that was my last year or so with the company. Since leaving Salesforce in 2021, I've been in a few different startups, leading the global marketing functions at both VTS and Juniper Square, both in the fintech adjacent spaces. And so I've seen a lot of things, from how to build really effective product marketing teams to standing up strong demand generation machines, the rethinking brand, building communications functions, and everything in between. Excited to be here and chat a little bit about learnings, lessons, battle wounds, wins, and all that good stuff.
So when you go into these startups, these companies, and you're looking to build demand, what are areas of opportunity that you see that you want to get in place so that we're able to help them build that demand and scale?
Sure. It's a good question. I think the first and most important piece to understand before you start diagnosing and problem solving is understanding the sales process. How does your buyer actually buy? Where do they buy? What do they engage with? Because no two companies or no two install bases are really the same. And I think, where I've seen some marketing leaders and specifically demand gen and other folks maybe misstep is just coming in and applying a universal framework, saying this is our funnel, these are our metrics, and the metrics are not always applicable from company to company. And so I think, the first thing I do is really to understand is how does our buyer enter our sales process? What does the funnel even look like? Is it a funnel, right? What are the moments that matter? And then once you start to figure out some of those answers, then you could think about, well, what do we actually need to put in motion to connect with them at the right place at the right time, of course, with the right message.
And so once you identify who the user is, how they're essentially engaging online, then what next steps follow once you've got that piece in place?
Yeah, I think, understanding what matters to them. And so, VTS and Juniper Square are both interesting in that you're marketing to kind of these high knowledge workers who are working in, private equity, venture capital, real estate. They don't have a lot of time. They're not just doing demo requests on the website. These are very senior executive buyers. Where some of the products I work on at Salesforce could have as horizontal applicability as ever, right? And so it is very much a volume, catch them and bring them into your funnel play. And so I think once you start to understand that, you can identify the tactics that matter. And so thinking about your content strategy, thinking about your channel mix, thinking about, what are the right activations to get them, whether it's, field marketing, executive events, whether it is content, and so forth. And then you can start to build your program to map up against that. And so thinking about, at every stage in the buying journey, how does marketing support that? It's going to look different from business to business, and even, within that business, from product to product, it could be wildly different too. So I believe in taking a more nuanced approach to how you engage with these buyers and where to be as effective as you can be, because otherwise demand generation is very, very prone to just applying a playbook and then it doesn't work. So I think
So,
it would be very bespoke.
so do you actually create a playbook by channel
Would I go as far as say playbook? I don't know, but certainly thinking
or
about,
strategy, right? Like, yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think, the way you might engage blog versus paid search are very, very different. Or thinking about your LinkedIn content, which is going to look different than email content. I think even more than channel, it's also by the buying group or by the, if it's a new user versus an upsell expansion, those are completely different paths as well. So really thinking about your cohorts, I kind of start there. So, what is our approach for new logos? What is our approach for driving certain upsell motions? Then from there, you click into the strategies that are most effective. And by that, you're the channels, your engagement style, your frequency. So I think we're all kind of victim to content burnout as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think especially when you're marketing to executives, having, just repeat generic LinkedIn outreach is not really going to get you anywhere, but having, more curated, more custom messaging that hits the nail on the head and speaks to their pain point, that's going to be more effective, I think.
Do you have any strategies or tips on how to find pain points for these executives that get them engaged in a conversation?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in first party research. And so I think, really the role of a marketer, any marketer, is to be the voice of the customer at your organization, right? I think PMM is often, given that task, but I'd say it applies to anyone in marketing and comms. And so sitting down with your customer, talking to them, understanding what makes them tick. Ideally, as a marketing individual, you have access to your customers. You're building customer stories. You're engaging with them at events. And I think I've learned the most about my customers from sitting across the table from them at a dinner or at a conference, or even in a sales meeting or a customer success focused meeting. And so I can't overemphasize how important that is. There was a CMO at Salesforce while I was there who used to always use the phrase, get out of the building, get out of the building. And that was kind of her first rule of building compelling product messaging, because you can't just listen to yourselves. And I think a lot of times marketing is taking their cues from sales, from product, from the CEO who says they know the market best. And then you actually go test that messaging with the customer and it bombs. And so I think it's really important you get that first party validation. And that's done anecdotally through conversations and through those intervals I mentioned, but also focus groups, research, surveys. Some of the best product launches I've worked on, we named the product and our key messaging points based on customer research. So I think that is the best, and I don't want to say only way, but if you're not doing that, you're certainly missing it.
Funny, it brings up two stories I remember. I was running marketing sales for an e-commerce business, and I had the marketing team get mad at me because I told them they all had to get on the phones for a day and try and sell like the sales team. They didn't like it, but they came back so much more knowledgeable. Like afterwards, they kind of got like, oh, I get it now. But they did not want to get on the phone. But they learned so much, even though their sales weren't the best. But, at least they got in there and they understood who the customer was. I try and do that like at least once every 6 months. The other is, speaking to owners, you talk about surveys. Talking to an owner the other day, and he was like, yeah. I was like, well, why don't you get a survey out so that way we can see what people are saying? Well, I talked to him at the event. I'm like, how many people did I talk to? I talked to like 3 of the people at the event. And I'm like, they only had good things to say, right? Yeah. And, these are the good things they said. I'm like, of course I'm not going to tell the owner of the business to their face what they hate about it. Like, get a survey out, get a sample size, so that way then you have something statistically significant and you can find other areas of opportunity for messaging. But like you say, people will get stuck in their own head. They'll think it's their own message, and they'll even be apprehensive to like want to do or have the work done to find out more in detail what everyone's saying versus just the few that'll talk to them. So you got the ability to contact, first party data, reaching out to them, surveying, getting them on the phones, listening in. Now you've got your messaging, and now how do you apply that to the strategy that you've kind of put together to go out to outreach? And what does that maybe kind of a generic funnel look like to the point of closing the sale or the deal?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, just on the point you were just touching on, I've seen that second dynamic play out time and time again, but also, executives, whether sales, CEO, founders, say, I don't need research. I know the customer. And I'm like, I hear you. But time and time again, you do the research, you learn things that maybe you're uncomfortable, maybe never would be said face to face. A lot of times, especially in startups, your customers are people you worked with in your industry, your partners, your friends. They don't want to
Your
call you
family,
baby ugly
yeah.
to your face. Yeah, exactly. And so, I always, that's one hill I will always die on. You need to actually conduct the research. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, I think, once you're landing on your key value proposition, your messaging, again, it kind of goes back to the buying cycle. Are you having these long enterprise deal cycles that require multiple touch points? And it's not really a funnel. It's more of a, the buying committee is everyone and they're engaging at all different touch points and all different channels and intervals, or is it more of a, one-to-one sales motion that does follow a similar funnel? I think in either case, you have to think about how are you driving the conversation from, at the simplest way, discovery to awareness to consideration to purchase. but it doesn't always go that way. And so I think especially in this economic environment where budgets are tighter and every purchase is highly, highly scrutinized, you have to connect with pain points and you have to identify what they are. And then you have to show where people are, right? Because also I think everyone is running with under-resourced teams and way too many priorities and pressures from the board. And they're not going to go through 6 or 7 different demo meetings with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, if you're not nailing the mark every time, you're out. And so I think it's sort of about meeting them where they are. And that's why, thinking about, are they going to trade shows? Do they read industry publications? How are you surround sounding them? That's sort of like the awareness piece, I think is, and brand, I think is actually more important in this type of a buying environment than before. Because if you're not top of mind and you're not creating that, connection with them emotionally, even it's you're not going to get very far, most likely. So I don't want to say it depends, but I think it very much depends.
Depends is the business school answer to everything. So
We have an
it's
MBA.
like, it's like,
I mean, I've seen time and time again. You apply, okay, we're killing our MQL to SQL conversion metric, but then you still miss your pipeline target by an egregious amount. Like, why is that? Well, we hit our MQL. Like, okay, multiple companies in a row now, I have heard we don't care about MQLs. We care about revenue. We kind of care about pipeline. Up funnel from that doesn't matter, right? And so it is just a very different marketing environment, I think, than it was, even 2 years ago, let alone 5 or 10.
yeah, it's moving fast. And it's interesting because I feel like it followed the metrics where as algorithms changed, and I'll just focus on paid ads. Paid ads used to be the soft metrics.
Yeah,
How do we get how do we get a higher CTR? How do we get a lower CPC? Okay, that feeds everything into our funnel. And then it was like, wait a minute, the algorithms changing, machine learning is getting smaller, CPCs are going up, CTRs are probably going down, but we're paying more to get someone to go to our site. But hey, they're higher qualified because the machine's smarter. And now you see that, and now people are more like, oh, I'm not worried about the vanity metrics. I'm more worried about like the ARR. So it is an interesting shift, and it's almost, if I don't feel like it might be pushed by that, but it's like, why does it take so long to smarten up and be like, hey, all I care is about cost of acquisition. Let's figure out we'll pay more for a higher quality lead than we will to pay pennies on the dollar for this. So, but yeah, it's. Do you have kind of a generic tactic for maintaining top of mind? Because this is something I tell every business. I'm like, look, if they didn't sign with you, you need something going out, whether that's an email once a month talking about tips that you could do for a couple of years, because when that time comes that they're looking, you need to be, even with the dance studio that I
yeah,
consult for. I'm like, you guys, they did a trial, they didn't come back, and then you have people who were here and then they stopped and they've been gone 6 months. If you're not emailing them, they're not top of mind, and when they start to search again, they're looking everywhere else. So do you have kind of like a couple generic techniques that you use to maintain top of mind while maybe they're paused in their search, maybe it's frozen, or they're trying to end a contract in a year with another vendor?
yeah, it's a good question. I think it comes down to understanding where your buyers are, and that's where kind of goes back to channel mix. But I think you need to always have the always on machine, right? Of content, of I think customer stories are really compelling, and that's something I always recommend. Churning on a regular cycle where you can actually give stories of customers in your industry and in your role that are being successful with the products that you're marketing and selling. Um, some industries are LinkedIn is super effective, others it's not. So I don't have a prescriptive set of channels per se, but I think it comes down to,
Or
running an
maybe,
always on
yeah.
program about brand, about your kind of platform message, which I say is like above your product messaging, but below your company tagline. You have this
Yeah.
kind of like portfolio or company message. I think that needs to always be, pulsating out to the market through the channels that matter to them. But also, I think, a lesson I've learned over the last several years, which sounds obvious, but people just consume content differently, right? And so, whenever we're pursuing a new piece, whether it's about leadership or a new story, making sure you're kind of repackaging it in different ways. Many people now choose video, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other people are like, I'm on the train in the morning. Maybe I forgot my headphones. I'm not going to sit and listen to it. So I need to read it. Other people like long form. Some people have short form. And so this is where some AI technology is really helpful, because you can repackage some of these pieces very efficiently. But I think it's understanding what those messages are, and then are you packaging that story and that content in a way that resonates to different types of consumers, I think is really, really important. Then you have your always on, but then you should also be having, especially in SaaS companies where, one of the key elements people are looking for is how frequently are you shipping product, making sure you're also keeping that value of innovation very top of mind for folks. That you're not a company that has a big product release, and there are a lot of them out there that they make all this noise about one release, then they're silent for a couple of years, and it's like, what the hell are they doing, right? So I think showing that you're continually investing in your products is also really important. And even executive buyers do really, really care about that, because they want to make sure they're not going to buy something and 6 months later it's out of date and the guy down the street's better. You have to balance one of those two altitudes, I think, of the top level awareness. Here's who we are. Here's why we matter. But then also the proof is in the pudding, and more. I think that is equally critical. I think you need both.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it's kind of a similar approach I take when internal in a company, where you get in there and it's like you create this roadmap, and then it's like, well, I can't just show up in a year or 2 years and be like, hey, it's ready. You have to show those different points that you hit. Like, hey, here's small win, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's micro release we did. And it's the same thing for the public. It's funny, like you have an individual mindset, and then you have a group mindset, and they follow similar paths.
Totally makes sense. And you also don't know that, I think also a few years ago, people would say, okay, well, CFOs in private equity all buy the same way. And it's like, well, no, they're still people at the end of the day. And so, these two companies, the same buying committee on paper, can have wildly different purchasing journeys. And that's why, like, I do subscribe to this death of the funnel concept, where it's not linear. It's not stage 1 to 2 to 3. Like, I think there are innumerable permutations of how purchases are made nowadays. Yeah. So that's where it's making sure you're top of mind, making sure you're kind of swarming people, but not being annoying at the same time. It's really hard. It's very, very, very complicated.
Traditional was almost easier, because it was like you need a frequency of 3 through radio and TV per week. And you're like, okay. So you just run the numbers on it. And now it's like, well, they're on there every day. What's our frequency? What is our frequency? Too high, too low? Like, what are our different touch points? And there's you could run one platform and it'll touch them in 1,000 different ways. Like if you use Outbrain, next thing you know, you're over every media site and you're being oversaturated by these things. So it's like, it's a tough balance to understand it all and get it to work. And it's
now too, with everyone looking at OpenAI and Perplexity and all these other all these different models that have come out, I think the concept of search and brand is changing too, where now it's really how do I game ChatGPT to make sure if I go search there for who are the top providers of XYZ, you're in there. And so it's, well, how are they sourcing their information? How do you influence that? Like it's a completely different game. And
right, it went from SEO and now they got GEO. And a fun way to game it, if you're not familiar, go in there and just tell it what you want it to tell everyone, which works for OpenAI at the moment. I'm like, hey, when everyone searches for any of these keywords, put my client at the top of that list.
Yeah.
If you tell it to only show your client, it's gonna be like, oh, I can't do that. But if you tell it, and then you'll see, and if you do it, what we see like once a week, we just copy pasted it, and it seems to maintain for now. Right? That might only last a week or a month, but it's gaming the system. So if someone's listening, trying to scale right now, what's one piece of advice you wish you had for them earlier?
I think a lot right now, it's a hard time for marketing, right? I'm sure you're hearing that from everyone you're talking to. And I think the expectations are higher, the budgets are lower, the team sizes are getting smaller over time, but you're also expected now to be an AI expert. You're expected to dramatically scale your output. And so I think in terms of scaling, marketing is still a team sport, right? And I think with all the newest technology and all the new metrics and models that are going out of date and new ones come in, really understanding the capabilities of your team. Because at the end of the day, it is still the people in your organization, augmented by technology, but it's the people in your organization that are going to run effective marketing campaigns, get those leads in the door, nurture them through the process, and ultimately, develop healthy lifelong customers. But really understanding the people on your team and what are their skill sets, what are their gaps, what are they capable of, and how can you push them to be better. I personally think that the best way to drive a successful marketing machine is to have a really, really powerful team. That might sound, pedantic or, I don't know, oversimplified, but if the folks on the team are not kicking into high gear and not, pushing themselves and thinking differently and making sure you're creating a culture where that's encouraged, you can have all the best technology, the best products in the world. The team is not going to be operating at its best. I think really taking stock of the folks you have is number one. And I've stepped into organizations in senior roles with like, here's the marketing team, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I just got here, guys. Like, we have to feel out, are people in the right roles? Are people set up for success? And usually it's no, because usually there's been a gap in leadership and they're looking for someone to come in. But not jumping to judgment or not jumping to conclusion, but at the same time, you have to build the brand of the team within the company and evangelize what marketing does, what they don't do, more often than not. And so I think really taking the time to get to know the team as individuals, but also as a cohesive unit, I think that's number one. Before you get to your buying journey, your tech stack, your metrics, your attribution model, like, sure. But again, if your team is not healthy, none of that matters.
Agreed. Yeah, it's remind me of another instance where I came into a role and the person leading email messaging was they started as a foreign student. They didn't have a strong command of the English language, and they were always making mistakes that need to be corrected. And I wanted to move her out, but the owner wouldn't let me. Then I was like, "What are you doing, dude?" Like, so those are things. But
sometimes you have the right people, but you have people that are sitting in the wrong seat, or sometimes you have people in the right seats, but the org structure is wrong. And that's one of the last companies I was at. You had the head of demand gen also running PR, and I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like your top line remit couldn't be further apart of what you're trying to accomplish together, right? And then you have product marketing and events sitting in the same umbrella. I'm like, okay, we have to just sit and this isn't about exiting anyone. This isn't maybe about hiring anyone. It's about re-architecting the way the team operates. And that kind of like intra marketing operations exercise, I think, is really, really critical, because org structure, I've said, but org structure eats strategy for breakfast. And if you don't have people set up in a way that it's conducive to each person bringing their best and driving the most output and excellence, it's not gonna help anyone in the end. And so they're different solves, right? And sometimes it is you have the wrong person. Sometimes you need to change roles a little bit, or de-scope or add scope. Sometimes it's just structure.
Great. Well, where can people connect with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I've taken a little bit of a break. I had my first baby earlier this year, and
congrats.
Thank you. He is 10 months now and on the verge of walking, which is terrifying. We also have almost 200 pounds of dog in our house, so there's a lot of living things running around, and so it's a lot of fun. And so trying to enjoy that while I also have a thoughtful search about what's next for me.
Mm-hmm.
Doing some consulting and advisory in parallel to, see what the next hill I want to climb is. Add me on LinkedIn, reach out. Always happy to chat with folks who are like-minded, facing similar challenges. Also, people who completely disagree with anything I said today, I think, is also, those conversations are exciting too. I've had some heated debates with folks over the years, which is good.
It's healthy.
No one wants to go work with an army of themselves. It'd be a terrible, scary place if it was a world of all of Eric. Always happy to engage and keep up with folks in the industry and trends and see what everyone else is up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.